Welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff, presented by AT&T and Alpha Insurance. Our first guest this morning, well, you'll probably recognize him mostly as Alabama's athletics director in the 80s and 90s. But for you folks that have followed Alabama football for a long time, you're going to recognize him as a great football player. Hootie Ingram, as a matter of fact, still holds the single-season interception record at the Capstone. And he's also been a coach at a lot of different SEC and ACC schools, head coach at Clemson, an assistant, as a matter of fact, at Arkansas.
Right, he's got some unique perspective on this game, and we welcome in Hootie Ingram. Coach, thanks very much for getting up early with us today.
It's my pleasure. It's not too early, though.
Yeah, by your standards.
By your standards.
Been up 3 or 4 hours by now.
Us nightside guys, you know. But, Coach, we want to talk about the Arkansas game in just a moment, but first we want to ask you a little bit about your playing days here at Alabama. You were quite a player back then. We were talking in the break. At one point in your career, you were averaging about an interception a game, and that was saying something because they didn't throw the ball a lot then.
Well, I was kidding some of the DBs at the university several years ago. One of them said, well, I'm going to break your record this year. And I said, well, I hope you do. Maybe we win more games. But I told him, I said, they throw more passes in 3 games than they did against us all year. And those 10 interceptions probably turn into 30 if I was playing now.
Following your playing days, you went on to a successful coaching career, started in the high school ranks, but then went on to college football and became a head coach at Clemson. Prior to that, though, you were on Frank Burrell's staff at Arkansas. As a matter of fact, Coach, you were on the staff in 1969 when Arkansas hosted Texas. Richard Nixon was in attendance. It was 1 versus 2. At that time, it was probably the biggest college football game that had ever been played. Talk about that experience and working for Coach Burrells, who, even though he retired a lot sooner than he had to, was one of the great coaches in college football.
Yeah, it was a great venue. I enjoyed Arkansas, and that was a super game. Darrell Royal and Frank Burrells were very close friends. And President Nixon came out. Billy Graham was out.
Wow.
Did the invocation, and I know those 2 people came out. It took a lot of 50-yard line tickets away. But it was a great game, and a 15-14 in, and unfortunately we were on the wrong side of it. But at that time, it was probably one of the bigger games. There was no playoff. That was a mythical championship game.
Yeah, you look back at that game, you lose it by a point. And certainly Texas was a great football team, as was Arkansas. But you had opportunities to win the football game, obviously in a 1-point game. And if memory serves me right, did you have a big play call back in that game?
We had an opportunity to lose the game, and we lost it.
Yeah.
We were ahead 14-7 and had the ball on their 10-yard line. 3rd down, rather than kick a field goal or kind of snuff it out and kick on 4th, there was only 2 minutes left. And on 3rd down, we elected to throw a pass in which they intercepted.
That's what it was.
And then went down and scored. And Darrell Royal, being the great coach he was, he wouldn't kick to tie. He went for 2, and unfortunately he made it.
Right. Coach, as someone who's worked at both institutions, Arkansas and Alabama, kind of describe the differences between those 2, and is the pressure the same in both environments?
Well, you know, Arkansas is in a state where they're the only BCS school in the state. And at the time I was there, when they were in the Southwest Conference, Arkansas was the only team in the conference that was not in the state of Texas. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of uniqueness to that. Arkansas does not play, doesn't have as many high schools playing football, and you've got to recruit outside the state. And so most of our coaches spend our time in Texas recruiting. But it's a real competitive deal. It's a lot of pressure there, just like it is everywhere else. Fett was located really very close to Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Right.
And Little Rock's close to 200 miles away from Fett. And so that's why they play some games in Little Rock, to accommodate their fans across the state, keep them off of traveling so much every week. But they got a lot of pride, and they've had some great teams.
Let's talk about today's game and a subject you know well, secondary play. Alabama's young secondary has held up pretty well. They've given up a few plays, but they've tightened up when they've had to. Still, though, they haven't obviously faced a quarterback the caliber of Ryan Mallett. Talk about that matchup. I know pressure will help the secondary out if they can get some heat on Mallett, but the job that they're facing today going up against a great throwing quarterback.
Well, you know, you're always worried about going against a strong arm like that. But I can see the secondary, young as they are, but very talented. Week to week, these 3 weeks, they've improved every week. They look like they have more rhythm to their defensive system than they've had. And Mallett is a guy, he likes to throw the bombs. And if we don't let him slip a deep one, I think we can snuff him out without any problem.
Coach, as far as Alabama's offense is concerned, do you think that Alabama, if they don't play the best on defense today, do you think that they could score enough points to beat Mallett and the Hogs?
Or shootout, if they get in a shootout.
Yeah, well, I don't think it'll be a shootout. I don't believe our defense is going to let us get in a shootout. But I would, being a defensive-minded coach, I'd hate to have to defend the Alabama offense now. Obviously, they can run the ball because the offensive line is strong. Got great running backs. McElroy's a very talented quarterback, knows where to put the ball, and they've got so many weapons, so many good receivers. Julio's a great one, but they've got other receivers that, as we've seen, are very dangerous. And it'd be a nightmare to try to defense that crowd.
Coach, I want to ask you, you've got a great historical perspective on college football, having played it, coached it, been an administrator in the Southeastern Conference office, an AD at Florida State and Alabama. Alabama's had some great runs throughout history. Coach Wade, Coach Thomas, obviously Coach Bryant. They won 28 in a row at one point in the 70s. When you were here with Coach Stallings, you won 28 in a row at one point. In the last few years, we've heard the days of dynasties are over, that you won't see that again. There's too much parity, scholarship reductions, and so forth. But right now, Alabama is in its 3rd season under Coach Saban that they haven't lost a regular season game. They played in the SEC championship game 2 years ago, would have played for a national title if they'd won that, played for it and won it last year, #1 in the nation. Could this be another one of these historic eras in Alabama football history? Are we in the midst of it, do you think?
Absolutely, and it's not over yet either. I remember when I was hearing my dad say when Coach Wade left to go to Duke, said, "Oh, my Alabama football's dead." And in walks my favorite coach of all time, Coach Frank Thomas, and he picked the thing up. He had his winning percentage is 80.1.
Right.
Coach Bryant's winning percentage is 80.2. So I believe Coach Thomas did a pretty good job. And then after Coach Thomas, Coach Drew did a great job, and then Coach Stallings came in. If you look back years ago, middle time, now, you're going to see Alabama, you're going to see Michigan, Ohio State, you're going to see Southern Cal. I hope we don't see them in the near future, but Texas, certain teams are going to be up there regardless of what the rules are, who's coaching, and so forth. They're just great schools, and the schools have got such tradition, they're going to be good.
John, traditional powers will always be traditional powers.
Absolutely. Coach, don't go anywhere. We're going to talk with you more right after the break. Up next, Coach Ingram gives us his thoughts on some of today's games in the SEC, including the big showdown in Auburn. You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff live from the University of Alabama campus. Welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff, joined this morning by former Alabama athletic director and former Alabama player Hootie Ingram. And Coach, after you got done coaching at Arkansas, you went on as the head coach at Clemson, actually credited as putting the tiger paw on their the trademark on their helmet.
Yeah, that's true. I made a big mistake. I should have certified that in my name.
Yeah, you'd be making a lot of money.
I'd be owning this station rather than be on it.
Oh!
But I had an artist in Greenville, South Carolina that I worked with, and he came up with a thought, and I agreed with him, and nobody else agreed but me and him for a year, but then it caught on big. And he said that paw identified the Clemson tiger. There's tigers all over the nation at different schools, and we wanted to do something that identified Clemson as a Clemson tiger. And that paw mysteriously was up there that he said there's a tiger in the area somewhere because there's his print, and nobody knows where it is. And so we went from there, and I had Judge Keller Hardware in downtown Clemson. It's kind of like local hardware store in any small town. He was the only one that would put merchandise out with a paw on it. In the first game we had, he sold out the day before the game.
You knew you were onto something then.
And then everybody else wanted it, and I said, well, you got to go through me and Judge Keller to get it.
Well, you know, before we move on to the other school in South Carolina, everybody thinks about Auburn and Clemson having a lot of similarities, but think of the Alabama connection at Clemson. Frank Howard, you, Charlie Pell, Danny Ford. Yeah. There's been a lot of tie-ins between these two schools over the years.
Been a lot. You can go back to Jess Neely.
That's right.
And Jess Neely, who actually started IPTAY. The IPTAY, their fundraising program, one of the first fundraising programs of any college in the country.
Right.
And but it has been a lot of ties that way.
Clemson played Auburn last week. Very physical game. Clemson Tigers lost in overtime. Auburn 3-0. They've won a couple close ones, which is what you've got to do when you're kind of trying to move up that rung. But now they get South Carolina. Steve Spurrier's got his best team since he's been in Columbia. You know, this is almost like one of those loser leave town matches, so to speak. The winner of this game is going to be in great shape. The loser's going to have to lick their wounds. How do you see that game down at Jordan-Hare tonight?
Well, I saw the Clemson Auburn game, and I thought that was by far the hardest hitting game that I've seen this year, and a real tough game. After the game, I looked at my schedule book, see who they both play next week. Clemson's got an open date.
Yeah,
they got a break. Auburn plays South Carolina. In my opinion, South Carolina is a more physical team than Clemson. They both got good teams, but it'd be hard for Auburn to hold up another situation with South Carolina like they played against Clemson. And our friend Ellis Johnson is the defensive coordinator at South Carolina and one of the best defensive coaches in the country. So I think Auburn's got their toughest fight this week.
Yeah, Ellis is getting it done. Who would ever think that Steve Spurrier would be winning with running the football on offense and a stout, very hard-nosed, old-school defense, but they're getting it done.
I think Ellis finally convinced him.
Well, you got to go in the SEC, unless you're at Florida, I guess.
Coach, thanks very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd love to sit here and talk to you all day. It's been very interesting. Coach Hootie Ingram joining us live this morning.
My pleasure. Tell Alex Gatewood I didn't get my elephant shirt.
Mr. Gatewood, you listening?
We're going to have to get you one, Coach.
Should have got an extra one this weekend. Well, Crimson Tide kickoff is just getting started. Coming up in our second half hour, Mark Ingram's return to the Alabama lineup was absolutely amazing. Was he hungry or what? But can he sustain the intensity now that SEC play is here? We'll talk with Birmingham News Alabama beat writer Don Kausler Jr. and ask him that very question. Richard?
Yeah, John and Gary, coming up after the break, we'll also break down your local forecast and take you into Fayetteville, Arkansas, and talk about the game. That's coming up after the break.
But up next, it's time to get the lowdown on the Hogs, and Ryan Mallett will go live to Fayetteville. Also get the Tide players' thoughts on the Arkansas quarterback. This much we know, Dante Hightower is licking his chops.
I've yet to get a sack yet, but
thank you, Coach. Appreciate it so much.
I'm itching for one, and this will probably be one of the perfect game to get one. You know, against a great quarterback and a team who wants to air the ball out. So hopefully I'll be able to get my hand in the dirt Saturday and get after Mallett.